Here we are at chapter 11. After the evening meal, Holt called a small group together. The wind had risen with the onset of night, and it whistled eerily through the branches of the pines. It was a clear night, and the half-moon shone brilliantly above them as they huddled in their cloaks around the remnants of the fire. Will and I were talking earlier, he told them, and I've decided that, since our discussion concerns all of us, it's only fair to tell you what I've been thinking. Horace and Evelyn exchanged puzzled looks. They had both simply assumed that the master and the apprentice were catching up on lost time together. Now it appeared there was something else to consider. First and foremost, Holt continued, seeing he had their undivided attention, my aim is to get you, Will, and he hesitated, stopping before he used Evelyn's title. They had all agreed that it would be safer for her to continue under her assumed name until they returned home. He corrected himself. Will and Evelyn, and Horace, of course, across the border out of Scandinavia. As escaped prisoners, you're in considerable danger if the Scandinavian recaptures you, and as we all know, that danger is even greater for Evelyn. The three listeners nodded. Will had told Holt and Horace about the risk to Evelyn should Ragnar ever discover her real identity as King Duncan's daughter. The Oberjar had sworn a blood vow to the Valors, the trio of savage gods who ruled the Scandinavian religion, in which he promised death to any relative of the Ireland king. On the other hand, Holt said, I am deeply worried about the presence of the Temujai here on the borders of Scandinavia. They haven't come this far west in 20 years, and the last time they put the entire Western world at risk. Now he really had their attention. He saw Horace and Evelyn sat up straighter and leaned a little closer to him. He saw the puzzled look on the young warrior's face in the firelight. Surely, Holt, you're exaggerating, Horace asked. Will looked sideways at his friend. That's what I thought too, he said quietly, but apparently not. Holt shook his head firmly. I wish I were, he said, but if the Temujai are moving in force, it's a threat to all our continents, Ireland included. What happened last time, Holt? It was Evelyn who spoke now, her voice uncertain, the concern obvious in it. Were you there? Did you fight them? Holt hesitated. He appeared unwilling to talk about his previous experiences with the Temujai. Finally, however, he seemed to come to a decision. I fought with them and, eventually against them, he said flatly. There were things we wanted to learn from them, and I was set to do so. Horace frowned. Such as? He asked. Will could see. What could the Rangers hope to learn from a bunch of wild horsemen? Horace, it must be admitted, had a somewhat inflated idea of the extent of the Rangers' corps' knowledge. To put it simply, he thought they were knew about everything that was worth knowing. You wanted to learn how they made their bows, didn't you? Said Will suddenly. He remembered seeing the bow carried by the horsemen and thinking how similar they were to his own. Holt looked at him and nodded. That was part of it, but there was something more important. I was sent to trade with them for some of their stallions and mares. The ranger horses we ride today were originally bred from the Temujai herds, he explained. We found their recurve bows interesting, but when you consider how difficult and time-consuming they are to make, they offered no significant improvement in performance over the longbow. But the horses were a different matter. And they were happy to trade? Asked Will. As he spoke, he turned to study the shaggy little horse standing a few paces behind him. Tug, seeing him turn to look, nickered a soft greeting. Now that Holt mentioned it, there was a distinct resemblance to the horses that he'd seen in the Temujai camp. They were not, Holt replied with a heartfelt shake of his head. They guarded their breeding stock jealously. I probably still wanted among the Temujai nation as a horse thief. You stole them, Horace asked in a mildly disapproving tone. Holt hid a smile as he replied. I left what I considered a fair price, he told them. The Temujai had other ideas about the matter. They weren't keen to sell at any price. Anyway, Will said impatiently, dismissing the matter of whether the horses had been bought or stolen. What happened when their army invaded? How far did they come? Holt studied the small pile of embers between them with the end of a cracked stick, until a few tongues of flames flickered in the red coals. They were heading further south that time, he said. They overran the Ursile nation and the Middle Kingdoms in no time at all. There was no stopping them. They were the ultimate warriors, fast-moving, incredibly brave, but most of all highly disciplined. They fought as a large unit, always, whereas the armies facing them almost always ended up fighting in small groups of perhaps a dozen at a time. How could they do that? Evelyn asked. She had been around her father's armies enough to know that the biggest problem facing any commander once battle started was staying in effective control and maintaining communication with the troops under him. Holt looked at her, sensing the professional interest behind her question. They've developed a signaling system that lets their central commander direct all his troops in concentrated movements, he told her. It's a very complex system relying on colored flags in different combinations. They can even operate at night, he added. They simply substitute colored lanterns for the flags. Quite frankly, there was no army capable of stopping them as they drove on towards the sea. They cut through the northeast corner of Tinchulet, then on through Gallica. Every army that faced them they defeated. Several times they were heavily outnumbered, but their superior tactics and discipline made them unbeatable. They were only 3 days riding from the Gallican coast when they finally stopped. What stopped them? Will asked. A noticeable chill had fallen over the 3 young listeners as Holt had described the inexorable advance of the Timajai army. At the question, the ranger gave a short laugh. Politics, he said, and a dish of bad freshwater clams. Politics? Horace snorted in disgust. As a warrior, he had a healthy contempt for politics and politicians. That's right. This was when Matlick was the Shashan, or superior leader. Now among people like the Timajai, that's a highly unstable position. It's taken by the strongest contender, and very few Shashans have died in their beds. Although Matlick did, as it turned out, he added as an afterthought before continuing. As a result, it's normal practice for anyone who might contest the position to be assigned tasks that keep them a long way away from home. In this case, Matlick's brother, nephew, and second cousin were the most likely candidates, so he made sure they were kept busy with the army. That way, not only could they not get up to mischief around him, but they could all keep an eye on each other as well. Naturally, they distrusted each other totally. Wasn't it dangerous to give them control over the army? Will asked. Holt sighed, signified that the question was a good one. Normally it might be, but the command structure was designed so that none of them had absolute control. Matlick's brother, Tuik, was the strategic commander, but his nephew was the paymaster and his cousin was the quartermaster. So one led them, one fed them, and one paid them. They all had plenty equal claims to on the loyalty of the soldiers. That way they could keep each other in check. So where did the clams come in? Horace asked. Food was always a matter of interest to him. Holt resettled himself by the fire, leaning back against the log. Matlick was partial to freshwater clams, he told them, so much so that they had very unwisely had his wife prepare him a big dish when they were out of season. It seems that some of them were tinted, and he was taken by a terrible fit while he was eating. He screamed, tore at his throat, fell down, and went into a deep coma. It was obvious that he was very close to death. Naturally, when news reached the army, the 3 main contenders for the job couldn't get back to the Shashan court fast enough. The succession would be decided by an election among the senior Shans, and they knew if they went back there to hand out the bribes and buy votes, someone else would get the prize. So they simply abandoned the invasion, Will asked, after they'd come so far. Holt made a dismissive gesture. They were a pragmatic bunch, he said. Gallica wasn't going to go away. They'd fought their way through there once. They could always do it again, but there was only going to be one chance to get the job. So the Western Hemisphere was saved by a dish of bad clams, Evelyn said. The Grizzle Ranger smiled grimly. It's surprising how often history is decided by something as trivial as a bad shellfish, he told her. Where were you while this was all going on? Holtville asked his master. Holt smiled again at the memory. I suppose it's one of those moments you never forget, he said. I was hightailing it for the coast with a small herd of... He hesitated, glancing sidelong at Horace. Fairly purchased horses, and a Timajai fighting patrol was right behind me. They were gaining on me too. Suddenly, one morning, they reined in and watched me gallop away. They then simply turned around and started trotting back east, all the way to their homeland. There was a brief silence as he finished the tale. Holt could have wagered that it would be Will who would come up with the next question, and he was not disappointed. So who became the Shan? He asked. The brother, or the nephew, or the cousin? None of them, Holt replied. The election went to a dark horse candidate who had designs on the countries to the next east of the Timajai homelands. The other three were executed for abandoning their mission in the west. He stirred the fire, thinking back to that well-remembered day when the pursuing riders had suddenly given up the chase and left him to escape. And now they're back again, he said thoughtfully. I wonder what they have in mind. Oh, look at that. We're on to chapter 12. So I'd like to thank you very much for listening to read up to chapter 11. If you'd like to listen to read chapter 12, then please stay tuned and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.